Postlude and Todinleben. Squeezed into an uncomfortable self-consciousness by a self-organizing sack of bacteria, we find ourselves in a peculiar dilemma. Poking its way out of this tube of sordid toothpaste is a head, upon which sits a face, and such a curious, bizarre face. The head has next to no sense of what it is made unless or until the organs which support it misbehave, fail, or rot. What an outlandish protuberance, its lips and mouth constantly spouting the purest nonsense. How comical, how utterly insane. To be an unconsciously intelligent, mobile bit of vegetation with a yammering little pinhead stuck on top, like an impotent birthday candle. Listen, the pinhead is rhapsodizing about its culture and free will, philosophizing, spinning tales of the afterlife. What queer fantasies slime molds have. They need only grow mouths which speak and hands which can wield pens. Listen. Mr. Pinhead's mouth is moving again, inventing stories to explain the activities of his liver and spleen, to which he is precariously and quite accidentally attached. Which comes first, the thoughts or the anxiety? One finds the latter at the very core of existence, in the wildly beating heart, the frantically squirting amygdala, the constantly seething magma which lurks just beneath the earth's crust. How deep the experience is and how eloquent the communications of the creatures who abide only there. They use no long and flowery words to desiccate the world, nor do they then go on to flatter themselves for having done so. Scientists force the latest, deeply unwilling subatomic particle into a momentary existence, silently screaming and wildly careening through the CERN accelerator. Horrified, it immediately withdraws back into oblivion. Its subjective experience of the world almost certainly as long and tortured as our own. If you penetrate this fatal mystery, even for a moment, there is no arcane wisdom, measured solemnity, or spiritual solace which can save you. There is the thinking man who lets ideas bubble up from his pancreas of their own accord into his constantly prattling pinhead, and then proudly claims them as his own. And then there are the wounded children, the painfully sick, those whose souls are impaled on daggers, rubbing raw against the jagged, lacerating vulva of creation. What is abstract speculation to such as these? Lies drive most of the world. From the subterfuges of viruses and Venus flytraps to the sordid manipulations of politicians and artists. But agony never lies. Where is death? In a transcendental realm? In a place other than life? Of course not. It is within us, immanent in the gross materiality of creation itself. Do you know these ashes, this dust? They are not different from you. One finds death in the agonies and ecstasies of our innermost vegetative selves, our hearts, lungs, and genitals. They both rule over and are life and death. Their self-organizing intelligence, the ground and being of what we imagine and flatter ourselves, belongs to us. It is to them we must turn when our sense of life is upended and shaken to its core, when we are suffocated with a choking terror of otherness, when all our fantasies of the integrity and uniqueness of life have been shattered and have become a distant, darkly comical memory. There is only one way in which men can go on and retain their joie de vivre: to think and act as if none of this is so. The lucky cow grazes unconcerned in her pasture up until those few dread-filled moments before her throat is slit. Consider her less lucky cousin in the factory farm, where the stench and reality of death surrounds her from the moment of her birth. A place where wisdom, nausea, and horror are indistinguishable. Who can retain their naturally pleasure-seeking voluptuousness, their naive enthusiasms, their delusions of accomplishments and legacies, while constantly hyper-aware that they sit unstably atop their own rotting livers, with their eyes fast receding into their sockets? Who, other than the lucky morons who live amongst us, is soothed by idle talk of posthumous ripples which they will not live to see? Such is the dilemma of the sick and deeply perverse, who must gaze upon the world through the filthy spectacles of their corrupted selves, consumed day and night by the savage electrical impulses of their unrelenting nervous systems, running riot with unending visions of the world's end. Once seen and felt, these things gut the soul, exposing nerves, sinews, and spine to the deliciously ghastly nightmare of perpetual, violent stimulation. Look there, look everywhere, for you can no longer turn away. The dead, the future dead, the last frozen gasps of a dying universe. But what of love? The ultimate deception? Or the force which drives the moon and stars? Not romantic love, that hormone-driven lie. Rather, that love which expands and finally explodes the self, filling the limbs and skull with an exquisite milky delirium, in which the prison of the body and one's eternal otherness fall happily away. The love of parent and child, that magical symbiosis, if indeed it is. Or, even more astonishing, the love between species, all the purer for its not being genetically driven. One drifts into an apparent eternity during such moments, temporary balms for one's existential madness, isolation, and panic. Are those precious moments simply swallowed by time, or are they rather a glimpse into that realm which generates time's brute existence? Is love a wistful, deluded distraction? A band-aid? A sip of sentiment-laced Kool-Aid? Or life's profoundest force and truth? Is love of this kind experienced by the naive man, the happy idiot? We have no way of knowing, for qualia are not directly communicable. Mystics are of no help here. Only great artists, riddled with agony and illness, can hint at its ecstatic and often bitter taste. What of the rest of us, the great mass of the ravaged and sensuously despairing, who haven't the gifts sufficient to express it, or who are so suffocated by pain and grief that they have not the remotest interest in doing so? The naive man still believes himself immortal. Hallmark expressions of love are accurate and adequate for him. Only despair links one to the metaphysical reality of death in life, to that love which cuts the soul loose from the body and sets it free. Only the eviscerated come to learn the dark and secret lessons of their own entrails. Depression is not a turning away from life, but rather its negation. In despair, a man still flinches and recoils in paroxysms of pain, a San Sebastian of agonized heat, and if he is eloquent enough, light. Depression, on the other hand, turns man hopelessly inwards to a final but sadly impotent encounter with death in the very bowels of his subjectivity. Love can send weak shafts of light and whisper its barely heard promises of solace, but never can it fully enter, understand, or heal the fatally inoperable wounds it finds there. It is only the still quivering, desperate man of whom love can make an angel, and only then through the relentless scorching and flaying of the body. Note how this body, this vegetative unconscious, the primary organ of our intelligence, so often chooses to die alone, when its loved ones have stepped out guilty and exhausted to grieve or escape into the momentary consolation of sleep. There are places love cannot conquer, in which it is not even welcome. There is, ultimately, only one fear. No clever Stoic argument can allay it, for its origin is organic, not rational. One responds honestly to it only with silence, trembling, despair, and distraction. Those who profess their equanimity in the face of death in lofty speeches and disingenuous works of art fool no one. The anguish and dread which sear the insides of the despairing man, along with any pretenses of acceptance or resignation he might offer, contain no revelations. They offer no tools or intuitions of any practical use, either to him or to those around him, whose lives he inevitably makes miserable. Who would not exchange a lifetime of faux profundities for a few moments of silently cradling and being cradled by the warm body they most deeply desire? Is love real? Is it a lie? As we wobble uneasily atop our rapidly decaying bodies, face to face with death, does it matter? A lifelong preoccupation with dying is a telltale sign of previous or ongoing illness or abuse. Any insights to which it gives rise are only feeble, narcissistic rationalizations, attempts to explain what can never be explained. The incessant, pulverizing din of charred neurons, mangled sinews, and traumatic preverbal body memories. These things will relentlessly consume you from the inside out as you're rapidly disappearing, still yammering pinhead, so haphazardly hinged to its generative primordial body intelligence, floats, bewildered and terrified, on a blood-red boiling sea, and, finally, undramatically and absurdly, drowns. Perhaps all pre- or unconscious vegetative moments of euphoria, terror, and oblivion are foretastes of eternity, or of that unbounded realm of love so many fancy awaits them. For now, there is nothing for us but to soothe ourselves, to embrace and lose ourselves in whatever drunken, deluded form of distraction forestalls or diverts us from the relentlessly nagging dread. We are something, nothing, flux, process, emptiness, the eternal void. Every being clutches wildly at its mortality. The bodhisattva and cancer cell both. Perhaps love charts the course of all existence. Perhaps it watches over us and guides us, waiting patiently to greet us under an ecstatic blue canopy of perpetual consolation, forgiveness, and joy. When and if you chance upon love in this life, drink deep and long, dregs and all. For when you decompose, such a wondrous word, so pregnant with meaning, into the particles from which the vast, unknowable universe has assembled you, that infinitesimal world in which your befuddled and fretful life has taken place will almost certainly die with you. For now, there are warm bodies, fires, jugs of oblivion from which to drink, filled with art, music, poison, fantasy, and dream, and the dazzling, fleeting Roman candles of love, whether real or imagined, which illumine and warm for an instant the eerily silent, immense, gaping maw of the frozen, desolate, infinitely ravenous night sky.